Welcome to Taking Stock with Lisa Brown. I recently read an article in the Wall Street Journal called "You Work for a Company, Should You Own It Too?" And in this article, it was really interesting. They talk about some of the issues going on in the labor market about 100 years ago in the 1920s, and how stock ownership in companies really started around that time as a way to deal with the labor union strikes and upset workers and issues that were happening in the job market. And I usually don't read a lot of the historical context around things like this. It just doesn't interest me. But this article really caught my attention because it talked about how private equity firms are now getting into the business of issuing equity to what they call the rank and file employees. And the article brings up some, really important points that happened 100 years ago that I think we still need to be cognizant of today. One being that when companies started allowing employees back in the 1920s to buy stock in their companies, at that time, you had to use your own money to do it. The employer wasn't issuing you stock as compensation. But these employees were buying more and more shares in the company that they worked with. And the hope was that they would get wealthier as a result. Well, as we can remember, 1929 rolls around, and that's the start of the stock market crash. And from 1929 to 1932, the stock market fell about 90%. So these workers who were using their own money in the 1920s to buy shares of stock in the company they worked for not only lost their jobs in the height of the Great Depression, but they also lost their balance sheets as well, with the value of their stock going way, way down. And that seems extreme, but the lesson is still important today, as employers have, not only public companies, but now private employers are issuing stock or continuing to issue stock as a form of compensation or incentive for people to stay working at their companies. It can be really easy for people to maybe feel a little aggressive or a little greedy and saying, I want more and more of that stock because I think this is my ticket to sudden wealth. And it very well could be. There's a phrase in the financial services industry that says concentrating your wealth is the way that you get wealthy. But when it comes to diversification, that's the way that you stay wealthy. And many of my clients have created wealth by owning stock in the company that they work for. However, people need to remember that this can be a double-edged sword. So if you have too much stock in the company you work for, not only is your paycheck tied to that company, your medical benefits may be tied to that company or other insurance benefits, your family's well-being, but your balance sheet's tied to that company. So one of the things to consider if you do have equity in your employer's company is to make sure that it doesn't become too big a part of your balance sheet. Now, while you're working, I've seen many cases where people have had 50, 60, 75% of their balance sheet in their company stock. And that kind of happened overnight, especially if there's a big run up in that stock price, then all of a sudden your 25% concentration goes to a 65% concentration. But as you're approaching retirement, it's really important to start unwinding that concentration if you haven't already. A good rule of thumb is to own no more than 10 to 15% of your investments in one single stock. Another way to look at it is if something happened to that company stock, are you no longer on track to reach your financial goals? Would you have to work several more years? Would you have to cut back your lifestyle? Would you have to not only cut back your lifestyle today, but enjoy less of a lifestyle when you do retire? All because you bet too much on one company. So while this article was really interesting and eye-opening, thinking about what happened 100 years ago, as we look at today and the stock market today, a number of tech companies, their stocks are down 20% or more. And those tech companies have been really big on issuing stock to their employees the last several years. So keep in mind that what goes up can go down. And it's a matter of making sure you don't have too many eggs in one basket. So take the lessons learned from 100 years ago, apply them to today, and keep your financial trajectory on track. Thanks for joining us today on Taking Stock with Lisa Brown.